So previously we have looked upon what a research is, what are the types of research, objectives of a research, what are the good characteristics of a research and a researcher. So we have done the introduction of research, and then we have moved on to the methods of research. Now after the methods of research, we have to study what are the steps of research. How can we conduct a research? What are the formalities? What are the procedures that we have to follow in conducting a research? So in many textbooks you can find many different steps. So what we have done is we have followed a common or a standard set of procedures or a rules or some standard set of steps that we have to follow in case we are conducting a research. So this is actually a very extensive list. What we have here, we have 8 or 9 points, and then we have sub points as to what to do. So you will have a very clear idea about how to conduct a research. So we'll dive right into the topic. The first step of any research is to select a topic. So what happens is, inside the topic is just not, you go and you see something, you select it, or you have been thinking about it for a long time, you select it. No, while selecting a topic also we have to keep some very important points in our mind. So we have to start by selecting a very broad topic. Don't just dive right into the topic and just select something. Start from a broad topic and then try to place the objectives. Start asking questions to yourself about the topic. Start asking questions about the topic to other people, and then try to make it more and more specific. Don't try to just start from a specific topic. Try the deductive argument system, or try the deductive area. So what happens is, you try a broad area, you start with a broad area and try to make it more and more specific. Now the topic should not be too vague. The topic should be feasible. It should be feasible for the researcher as well as the supervisor or the guide or anyone who it is. So it should be very feasible and possible. So then the next one is, there should be a scope. There should not too much work should already be done in that area. So in any area you take, there will be one or two, or at least one or two researches, or at least one or two investigations that might have happened in that area. But what happens is, if you are taking a topic in which too much work has been done. For example, in the case of India and all, people have already studied a lot about customer satisfaction or customer preference, customer awareness, customer perceptions, brand loyalty. So people have already studied a lot about these areas. So what happens is, try to avoid those areas. Try to come up with something new. Try to come up with something which is interesting for you and even for others. So there should be some scope left to study in that topic. Then cost should be considered. As I said earlier, it should be feasible, it should be possible, and it should be economical. Then relevance should be considered. Just think about whether this topic that I am studying now, is it relevant today? Is it relevant in this scenario? For example, talking about demonetization, or conducting a research about demonetization. It happened like years ago, and many researches, many articles, many journals have been conducted and written about that area. So studying about that, again, it does not have any relevance right now. Studying about making a research about maybe the independence of the country, it does not have a relevance right now. So relevance should also be considered, and at the same time, time should also be considered. So time, cost and relevance should be considered while selecting a topic. So that is how you select a topic. You consider the time, relevance and the cost. You check whether the topic has relevance and scope. You start from a broad topic, you come and become more and more specific. Don't become vague, and that is how you select a topic. The second step in a research is to define the problem or explain the problem. So once you have selected the topic, you try to define or explain what the problem is, what you have found in that area that made you select such a topic. So and what we are actually studying in that topic. So that is actually called the defining the problem step. So it provides a clarity about the topic, it provides a clarity about the research. It should state the importance, benefits and justification of the study. I mean, why you are studying this, or what benefit will you get after studying this. So that is called the defining the problem. Unnecessary technical languages and all can be avoided, and then in simple plain terms you try to explain what you are trying to study. That is define the problem. The third step is literature review. So literature review means analysis of books, analysis of journals, analysis of magazines, websites, articles and other documents, and to familiarize ourselves with the work that has already been done in that field. So it's not like you take a topic and you are the first person in the world to study about that topic. No, it does not happen that way. As I said before, any topic you select, even it how much ever rare, there might be at least 1 or 2 studies or articles based on that particular topic. So what happens is you take those the articles or the books that have been studied about that topic, you take it, you read about it, you check the summary of it, you read about the findings and suggestions of that author, and then you try to have a much clear or a much better idea about your topic. So it is to familiarize the researchers with the works that have already been done in that field. And the literature review, what happens is we write the literature review in our own subject, in our own researcher project. So it should be well organized, maybe chronologically or maybe alphabetically, however it is, we try to organize the literature review, and the researcher should decide what he will contribute to the field. So what happens is we try to collect the literature review, we try to collect the books or the journals or magazines or articles in that field, then we try to study them, and then we conduct our research. And after studying the literature review, we think to ourselves, these authors have contributed this much to this field. So in the same way, what am I going to contribute to this particular field? For example, just for the sake of example, let's say that a customer satisfaction, we take the topic of a customer satisfaction, there will be loads of work already been done on that topic. So we try to take some of them, maybe 20 or 30 books or 30 articles or 30 projects, and then we try to study about that. So studying about that, then we get an idea about what these authors have contributed to the field of customer satisfaction. And then we try to think to ourselves, what am I going to contribute apart from these? So contributing the same thing means it comes to copying or plagiarizing. No, what am I, apart from these, what am I going to contribute to this particular field? That we can know only after studying about the literature review. Then the fourth step is to develop objectives. So after studying about the review of literature, we get a much clearer idea about our own topic. So while selecting a topic, we won't have that much of an idea, but after the literature review, we know what we have to do. We know the works of all the other authors, and so we have eliminated some of them. We know what we have to do. So what happens is, after the review of literature, the researcher or ourselves will have a much clearer idea about the topic. So then we can set our objectives, what we are going to study. Objectives state what exactly the researcher is studying. It should be very specific and easy to understand. So the objective is just like a research problem or identifying the problem. We are trying to tell the readers, we are trying to tell the viewers that what we are trying to study or what we are studying. Now objectives can be primary objectives as well as secondary objectives. Primary objectives means the main objective or the main aim of the study, and secondary objectives means the objectives, the aims that is achieved along with the main aims. So the main aims is called the primary objectives, and some other objectives or some other aims that we can achieve along with the main aim is called the secondary objectives. The next one is to identify the variables and formulate a hypothesis. So in small, if you're conducting a very small project or a very small research, variables and hypotheses are not that much important. But if you're conducting a proper standard research or a proper standard project, you need to identify your variables, you need to formulate a hypothesis, and you need to test the variables based on the hypothesis. So identifying variables means here we identify the variables or elements and then we try to relate them. So for example, in a customer satisfaction, we try to relate customer satisfaction and cost. If cost increases, does it decrease the satisfaction of the customer? If quality increases, does it increase the satisfaction of the customer? So we try to relate two or more variables or elements in our topic. We analyze the effect of one variable over the other. For example, just a little example, the sale of ice creams. So we try to try to relate it with the season or the weather or the temperature. So if the temperature of a day, if the weather is very hot, the sales of ice creams will go up. If the weather is very cold, the sale of ice cream will go low. So this is what happens. We try to analyze the effect of one variable on the other variable. Now there are some types of variables. Continuous variables, the first one, it can be expressed in decimals. For example, weight 98.5 kilograms, 46.2 kilograms, so which can be expressed in decimals. Then we have non-continuous, which can only be expressed in whole numbers. That means number of students in a class, 32 students, 35 students, 48 students. So that is non-continuous variables. Then we have dependent variables and independent variables. Dependent variables means which are under the influence of some other variable. Independent variable means which are not under the influence but which can influence other variables. So dependent means they are dependent on other variables, but independent variables means they are not dependent on any variables. Next one is extraneous variables, which means that which have effect on the direct the dependent variable, but they are not part of the system. For example, what do you say, the same example, the ice cream example that we took earlier. The sale of the ice cream, that is actually a dependent variable. It is dependent upon the weather. If the weather increases, the sale also increases. If the weather decreases, the sale also decreases. So the sale of the ice cream is actually a dependent variable because it is dependent on the weather. The weather is actually an independent variable because it influences the sale. So apart from this, for example, a child, he or she is walking down the street, the weather is very hot. So in the normal case, he or she will buy an ice cream, so the sale of ice cream will go up. But in the case of extraneous variable, suppose that child is not in a mood to eat an ice cream. So his mood or his feeling or his emotions at that time is actually an extraneous variable. It has an effect on the dependent variable, but the mood of the person or the feeling of the person is not actually part of the system. So it is an external variable which has an effect on the dependent variable. That is what we call as extraneous variables. Then we have categorical variables, which have only a specified set of options. For example, what do you say, yes or no question. So we either have yes or we either have no. There is a specified set of options that we can select from. For example, someone asks your blood group. So the A plus, B plus, A minus, B minus, O negative, O positive. So there are only a very specific set of options that you can choose from. So that we call as categorical variables. Then we have the demographic variables. It is to describe the nature of the sample. That means age, gender, marital status, income status, etc. So those are demographic variables. Then we have active variables which can change. For example, expenditure of a month. So expenditure of this month may change from the expenditure of next month, or the expenditure of one person can change from the expenditure of other person. So active variables means it can change. Attributed variables, the next one means which cannot be changed, like the age of a person, which you ask him the age this time, you ask him the next time, or you ask him, the age of two persons will not change, or it does not have an effect on the variables. So that is what we call some types of variables. We have continuous, non-continuous, dependent, independent, extraneous, categorical, demographic, active variable and attributed variable. Now those are about variables. Let's come to hypothesis. So hypothesis, as we know, it is a tentative statement or it is an assumption, and that assumption we try to test and we try to verify, and then we try to examine if it is true or not. So we try to assume the end result of the project at the starting itself. So from the starting itself we try to assume, okay fine, this will be the result of the project, or this will be the result of the research after I complete it. So it is a type of assumption or a tentative statement that we declare at the starting of the research. We have two types of hypothesis, as you all know. The null hypothesis, which is the not part of the hypothesis, and then we have the alternate hypothesis. So we try to reject or accept the null hypothesis. So this is what identifying variables and formulating hypothesis means. The next step is sampling. So it is one of the most important part of the research methodology that we have studied. So sampling means, while studying about a research, a whole population cannot be actually taken for a study. For example, we are studying about the customers of SBI Bank. So what happens is, we cannot, our population contains the crores of people who have accounts in SBI. But what happens is we cannot study the whole population, so we try to get few people from the population and then we study them and then make a general statement. So that taking of some people from the whole population is actually called sampling. A representative of the total population is selected and studied. That is actually what is called as sampling. Then there should not be any error while selecting samples. So what happens is we are studying about the whole population, and if we have any error in selecting samples, our final answer or our final solution will also be in the term of an error. It will also be a mistake. So we have to check what type of sampling we are going to use in some specific researches. So in some research we have to use some specific type of sampling, in some other research you have to use another type of sampling. So sampling is a very important thing in research. So there are some types of sampling. We can broadly classify them into three as probability sampling, quasi probability sampling and non probability sampling. And in probability sampling we have simple random sampling. That means we select someone very randomly, so anyone of the population has the chance of getting selected. So that is simple random sampling. Lottery method is an example. We put all the lotteries together and then we pick one. So just like that we pick a person from the whole population. It is called simple random sampling. Next one is stratified sampling. In stratified sampling what happens is we divide the whole population into some stratas. So for example the country of India, so suppose we have 28 states. So what happens is we are studying about a population in India. We divide the whole of India into 28 different stratas or 28 different groups, and then we select some from each strata, or from each group we select from one group we select 2 people, the other group we select 2 people, then from other group we select 2 people, and then taking from all the stratas we get a good sample. So that is called stratified sampling. It means the population is divided into stratas or groups and samples are taken from each strata. The next one is cluster sampling. So in cluster sampling what happens is the whole population is divided into different clusters, or in the same example some groups, and then one cluster as a whole is selected. So just for example in the case of India we are dividing into 28 groups. So in stratified sampling what happens is from Kerala we take 2, from Tamil Nadu we take 2, from Delhi we take 2, from Mumbai we take 2 samples, from Kolkata we take, from West Bengal we take 2 samples, from Maharashtra we take 2 samples. So that is how stratified sampling goes. But as far as cluster sampling is there, we divide the total of India into 28 states and then we take only one state, for example Bihar. So only that cluster is selected as a sample, the rest all are kept aside. So that single cluster is selected as the whole sample. That is the difference between stratified sampling and cluster sampling. In stratified sampling one sample or 2 samples is taken from each groups, but in cluster sampling what happens is one group as a whole is taken as sample. Next we have the quasi probability sampling or the semi probability sampling. They are not entirely probability or entirely random, but still they are semi random or semi probability sampling. So what happens here, the first one is systematic sampling. What happens is the first sample is selected as a random, then every nth sample is taken. Nth means every nth term. For example, the first sample is selected as the 4th. The population is given an order in an ascending order or a descending order. For example, if there are 30 students in a class, so the 4th student is selected as the first sample. Then we select every nth student. For example, then the value of n is 10. So for example, if the first student is 4, then the next sample is the 14th student, then the 24th student, then the 34th student, the 44th student. So it goes like that. So the first student is taken as a random, and then every nth number or every nth term or every nth variable is taken as the sample. That is systematic sampling. Then we have multi-stage sampling, in which sample is chosen in multi-stages. The population is studied little by little. So the whole population is taken and little by little all the population is studied. So that is multi-stage sampling. The last one is non-probability sampling. In here there is not any probability, there is no probability, or there is no randomness. So every every sample is selected on the basis of the researcher. So there is a possibility or a chance for bias in the case of non-probability sampling. So in non-probability sampling we have quota sampling. So population is divided into quotas according to the percentage of representation in the population. So in the same case, in the case of India, we have 28 states and we need some samples. So what we do is we divide India into, again we divide into 28 groups, and then what happens is we take samples based on their percentage to the total population. For example, if you are studying about the size, so what happens is we take the most samples from Rajasthan or Maharashtra or Madhya Pradesh, which are the biggest states. We take only a few samples from maybe Goa, from maybe Sikkim, so because they are somewhat smaller states. So we again divide the whole country or the whole population into groups, but then we take samples based on their contribution to the total population. So that's what happens in quota sampling. Next one is judgmental sampling, which is according to the judgment of the the researcher. If he feels that that person is good as a sample, he can take it. If he feels that this person is not good for a sample, he can avoid it. So it is according to the judgment of the researcher, which is called the judgmental sampling. Next one is convenience sampling, which is according to similarly according to the convenience of the researcher. This person is near to me, so it's convenient to ask him. This person is also near to me, it's convenient to ask her. So according to the convenience of the researcher, he or she can choose the respondents or the samples. The last one is snowball sampling, asking the first respondent. So we get a first respondent, we get a person as a respondent, we note down his response, we give him the questionnaire, we ask about him. So after everything is over, we ask him or her, okay, fine, where can I find my next respondents? Could you refer me to another respondent? So he'll tell about one or two other respondents. Then we go to the other respondents, then we ask them about who can I get as my next respondent. So asking about people, telling them to refer us some other respondents, that is actually called referral sampling or snowball sampling. So these are the different types of samplings. You have your notes in front of you, have a look through it and you will get a very clear idea. The next one is collect data collection. So collection of data is done to to present the data, to verify the hypothesis that we have selected earlier, to know that whether everything is fine, to have a good idea about our topic, to go deep into a topic. So for all this we need data collection. So we have two types of data. Primary data, we can fresh collection of data where we give out questionnaires, we get the answers, we call them for interview, we ask them, we get answers. So fresh collection of data directly from the source is called as primary data collection. Then we have secondary data collection, which means that collection of data which is already available. We check for newspapers, we check for magazines, we check in websites, maybe websites like which are already familiar, Shodhganga, Shodhgangotri, or any other research websites, articles in magazines. So these are already published and we are just taking them from it. So that is called the secondary data collection. Then after collecting the data, the next step is analyzing of data. So we draw conclusions from the collected data. We try to put that collected data into test. So we are testing them actually to answer our research questions and objectives. So we have set the research questions and objectives at the first, and what happens is we try to use this data to answer the questions that we ourselves have set. It can be done manually or through softwares. Manually we can sit and calculate using different formulas, or you can use different softwares, even the basic software such as MS Excel, or some advanced softwares like the SPSS. All this can be used to analyze data or test data. Mean, median, mode, frequencies, correlations, regressions, F test, T test, Z test, chi-square test, all these are types of analysis. So even a presentation of data forms a part of analysis, because we are actually calculating the percentage, we are actually calculating the frequency. Sometimes we are calculating, as I said before, the F test, the relationship between the people, the similarity between the people, the differences between different elements. So we are analyzing and keeping on testing data and presenting it to the viewers or the readers. So that is called analyzing data. From the collected data, we try to analyze the data, we try to test the data and then present in front of our readers. That is called analysis of data. Next one is the interpretations and the suggestions. So if the data, suppose if we collected data, we tested them, and if everything is okay, we can interpret the data, and then we present the data in front of everyone, we present our findings in front of everyone, and then we give suggestions based on our study. So that is a very easy step. We collect data, we analyze data, and based on the data we just, what we say is, we present the data or we give suggestions about the data, we just interpret the data. The last step in a research process is to write the research report. So researcher explains about the topic, about his objectives, about we prepare a research book or maybe a research data or a research report. So in that we give an introduction, we tell about our research problem, we tell about our objectives, maybe our hypothesis, the limitations that we face, the challenges that we faced, an introduction into the topic, then the review of literature, the data that we have collected, the findings, the suggestions, the conclusions, everything comes in the research report. It includes title, acknowledgement, table of contents, list of tables, list of charts, introduction, then the different chapters, review of literatures, findings, suggestions, conclusions, bibliography, references, appendix. So everything that we have studied as a part of research, we include it in the research report. So how to write a research report, or what are there inside a research report, we'll be studying in the coming classes. But for right now, these are the steps of, or the different steps of research. We'll just have a look from the top. First, we select a topic, a good topic, then we define the problem, like what we are going to study, then we see about the literature review, the studies that already have been conducted in this area. Then after that, we develop very clear cut and specific objectives. We identify the variables and formulate hypothesis. We take the samples, which is called as a sampling. We collect data based on these samples. We analyze data based on the collected data. Then we interpret and give suggestions, and at last we write the research report and present it in front of in front of our readers. So while referring different textbooks, or while referring different materials, or maybe websites, you can find some points which are not there here. You can find maybe some websites have 7 points or 8 points. You can see some have 13 or 14 points. Anyway, whichever is fine. You just have to know that all these points will be included in a steps of research. So if you are conducting a research, follow these steps, and if some questions based on these comes in the question paper, you can have a very clear idea by following these notes.